Welcome to another episode of On This Day on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. I'm your host, Mike Goodpaster, and today we're going to talk about December the 19th, 1948, and the Chicago Cardinals at the Philadelphia Eagles for the 1948 NFL Championship, won by the Eagles 7-0 in a snowstorm. Now, from all appearances, in the city of brotherly love on December 19th, 1948, there was not to be a football game that day. There was a thick, fresh blanket of snow on the ground. Eagles halfback Steve Van Buren thought for sure that the NFL championship game was canceled. The league was forging ahead with the game as planned, so Van Buren took a bus and two trolleys to get within blocks of 20th and Lehigh in North Philadelphia. There, sandwiched between row homes from which residents watched World Series games from the rooftops, was Shibe Park, an ornate cathedral of sport. NFL Commissioner Bert Bell, a former owner of the Eagles who sometimes ran league operations from his kitchen table in nearby Narberth, Pennsylvania, insisted that the game be played. Despite the fact that there was already 4 inches of snow on the ground, with an unrelenting assault of a storm continuing. Not only had thousands of people come out from all over town to see the Eagles battle the Cardinals, but this game was to be the first televised championship game. The ABC television network, which first went on the air only a few months earlier from the Philadelphia station, was broadcasting to a few stations in the northeastern states and a handful of television viewers. Now, the Cardinals, who arrived by train an hour later that day, or an hour late that day, before it got in kind of a half-hearted practice and probably wouldn't have minded postponing the game. The Eagles had also had trouble getting practice in, and as their legendary coach Greasy Neal opted to work out across the street in what is known as Rayburn Park, rather than roll up the tarps at Shibe Park. On game day, the tarps were rolled back with the assistance of players from both sidelines. Could you imagine, Odell Beckham Jr. and Tom Brady helping to roll the tarp off the field? And when they rolled the field off, Odell Beckham's a Brown, so that's probably not as crazy as the Browns being in the Super Bowl, but I digress. Now, the kick-on, when they took the tarp off the field, they had a freshly lined grass field. The kickoff was delayed half an hour, and by the time the game started, the field already had been covered end to end in snow. Ron Gibbs was the official that day, and one of the best officials the NFL had. He called 15 of the 20 championship games from 1941 to 1960. He knew right away that the chain crew could not operate effectively on the sideline, so it was up to Gibbs to make the call if a team made the line to gain. Now, Gibbs later recalled, "I told the head linesman, when I signal, you move. Under conditions, I didn't want him standing around to get into arguments with coaches." In fact, Commissioner Bell addressed that to both coaches. Seeing as there would be difficulty for the crew, he made the coaches agree not to dispute any spots or first down calls. I could just hear a coach responding today, "I don't know about that," to such a request. Of course, we get replay now that can screw it up too. But Gibbs also took a further step and improvised a crew of 8 officials, something seen now at the college level in a few NFL preseason games. But this was first and to date apparently the only time the NFL had 8 officials on the field for a regular season or postseason game. Now in 1948, there were supposed to be 5 officials. And as the T formation might have been the most exotic of the era, the referee was in the standard location, the umpire in the defensive backfield. At the snap, the head linesman was in bounds, closely monitoring the line, and the back judge was 2 to 3 yards behind the line, monitoring the offensive backfield and transitioning to receivers. Both were responsible for all 100 yards of sideline on their side of the field. The field judge worked up the middle. The position names for field judge and back judge were actually swapped, I believe, in the late 1990s by the NFL. The line judge wouldn't be added until 1965 and the side judge in 1978. Assigned to the game were 3 alternate officials who would come into the game in case of an injured official. Now, Gibbs pressed them into service. He placed 2 as sideline assistants to key on boundary calls. The goal line assistant would always work behind the defense to monitor the end zone. Football Zebras had determined through film and newspaper accounts. The other officials that assisted on the 8-man crew, and now 70 years later, the full crew, and their positions are presented here. You had Ron Gibbs as the referee. The umpire was Samuel Wilson. Head linesman was Charlie Berry. William McHugh was the field judge. The back judge was Robert Austin. And then the alternates were John Glasscott, Joseph Crowley, and Henry Haynes. Gibbs later went on to say, "It was the first game I knew of where 8 officials were used. We had 5 regular officials there and 3 alternates. We needed them all that day. While the crew of 8 scampered around the field with improvised mechanics, they could be seen overlapping from time to time. Some of the crew wore striped shirts, others were in their warm-up jackets that were acceptable for game use at that time, and Gibbs recalled that the footing was not too bad with cleats. From the film footage that exists of the game, there wasn't an issue with the officials getting in the way at the sideline, but umpire Samuel Wilson got knocked down by a Cardinal defender as Eagles quarterback Tommy Thompson faked a pitch and ran it himself. Also, the rope used to keep the sideline visible sometimes ensnared a player or two." Now, on the opening play of the game, the Eagles struck first, calling an 81 special, which was a 65-yard touchdown pass to tight end Jack Ferranti. He slipped and fell at the 20-yard line, right around the 20, hard to tell with the snow, got up and he scored. The play was called back on an offsides penalty. Ferranti immediately went to headlinesman Charlie Berry, demanding to know which of his teammates wiped out his touchdown run. "Who the hell was offsides?" he said. Berry replied, "You." I guess that'll shut you up. Now, down by contact rules existed at the time, but required more than just a touch, which is why Ferranti sprang to his feet and was able to gain extra yards. In addition, the foul on Ferranti would now be a false start, and the official would have blown the play dead anyways. Now, despite being played in the middle of the afternoon, the stadium lights were on throughout the game, which also was a concern for Gibbs. He said, "That was another situation that had me worried. I had arranged the signal for the lights, if I thought they were needed, by taking off my cap and waving it around my head. I did that just before the game started, and it was a good thing because they really helped. I hadn't arranged for any signal to turn them off, and you know how it is, sometimes at night when driving through snow, lights make it worse." It wasn't until the fourth quarter that the scoreless stalemate was broken. Van Buren had run for a touchdown on the third play of the fourth quarter, taking advantage of Cardinals' fumble on their side of the field. Kicker Cliff Patton cleared a short path in the snow for a 2-step, head-on, toe ball or kick. You know, that's the old straight on, no soccer style here. That was the style of that era, and added the extra point. Philadelphia would get its first NFL championship on that 7-0 victory. You know, since then, of course, they won it again the next year in 1949, and then in 1960, and of course a couple years ago. But the interesting thing about this game was the weather that the game was played in. Of course, I don't think we'll have a Super Bowl in the snow again, since all the games are played in warm weather. But I would suggest going and Googling the 1948 NFL Championship game on YouTube, where you can actually find some footage of the game. And it's amazing they played in that. And like I said, the thing that really struck me was the players banding together from both teams to help clean the field so they could play. Not something that would happen these days. But that's our story for December 19th, 1948, the day the Philadelphia Eagles won their first world championship in a snowstorm over the Chicago Cardinals. Now, guys, you can hear On This Day every day at thegruelingtruth.com. You can hear all of our shows on iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you find sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So, this has been Mike Goodpaster, and you've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.